Hi folks, welcome back to another episode of the Guitar Cast. This week we've got an amazing Australian drummer here, Mr. Darran Muller. How you going?
Yes. Good, thanks.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, really
Hope you like my guitar.
I love it. I was thinking, how are we going to, they make notes.
They
drums.
do. Yeah, true.
Yeah. There are notes on the drums.
They can be pitched.
Yeah. Folks, Darran is an international and Australian renowned drummer. He's had over 30 years of experience in the music industry as a live player, a session player, an educator, a producer, a studio owner. Notably, he's played for Guy Sebastian, Evermore, the Ten Tenors, Toni Childs recently, and he's a super cool guy. So thanks for coming in, mate.
Yeah, thank you. This is fun.
I've started most of these with how I met met people.
Yeah.
Right. And I first met you in, I think it was 2013.
Right.
Yeah. It was a gig with Brooksy down the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
And we got to hang before and have dinner.
Yeah.
So we were in the green room having dinner, big round table, and there was a bread basket in the middle.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, hey, Darran, can you pass me the bread basket? So you emptied the bread out on the table and gave me the bread basket.
Yeah.
So I was like, I like this guy. So I'm going to be really careful on how I ask my questions today.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, everything will be logical, and so I'll take you at your word.
Yeah. No, but on that, that's a hang, right? So hanging before a gig. You've done a lot of touring.
Yes.
A lot of session work.
Yes.
Traveling.
Yeah.
How important is a hang with musicians?
It's a funny question because I don't particularly think I am a good hang,
right?
If you know what I mean, because maybe earlier on in the career I was, but now I'm like if I'm at a gig and we've got downtime, I am checking football scores. Who's qualified for the F1, So I do engage with my fellow bandmates as well. Yeah. But yeah, it's a funny one. But no. Sometimes, and I know this from experience, sometimes people will book a musician for a gig, not because of their ability on the instrument, but because they fit in well with the other players and they are a good hang on the gig. And so, I do try to lighten the mood just with my personality and the way I view life and see things. And like I guess your first example there was probably the best one I've heard in a while, but that is exactly who I am.
It was brilliant.
Yeah.
I went, oh, that's good. I remember Brooksy looking going, No, but that's I hear a lot of people talk about the hang.
Yes.
And a podcaster recently, I'm using his quote here, and I'm not going to use the language, but he said, don't be a fill in the blank, because no one likes a fill in the blank, and word travels fast if you're a fill in the blank.
Yeah.
You can think of whatever
you can
language.
fill in the blank.
You can fill in the blank. Yeah. But it's so true, isn't it? Because when you're playing on stage, if you don't like someone or are not getting along, that comes across in groove and playing, especially in a studio setting. So I think you're a good hang.
Thank you. I'm glad. So I think it's definitely important because the industry and the just the where we live and the industry we're in our own little backyard is quite small. Yeah. And so it doesn't take more than one gig for a word to get around that, something's happened or you're not a very good person. So like I said just earlier, I am a happy-go-lucky person. I wear my heart on my sleeve. Yep. I do like to, let's not say be the class clown, but I do like to lighten the mood. If you can kind of tell that there's tension in the air sometimes when you walk into a room.
Oh yeah.
But it's also the same on the stage. It's and I'll give you a great example of the most recent time this has happened. Yeah. I was playing with Toni Childs.
Yep.
And there's no scandal here or anything. This is exactly what happened.
Right.
We were playing the second date of an Australian tour, Australian and New Zealand tour. We were supporting the cause.
Yep.
So it was a big thing. And
Yeah.
we were playing at Sandstone Point Hotel. We're doing at the Brisbane venue of the tour.
Yep.
And we basically, earlier in the day, set up, done our sound check, everything fine.
Yep.
We were the second band on
Yep.
out of the three support acts.
Yep.
Natalie Imbruglia her band was straight after us,
Yep.
and then the Cause. And everything just went awry.
Right.
And so Toni walks out to start her set, and straight away her microphone just starts squealing. Then
this is live.
This is live.
Yeah, right.
We've got probably at this stage half the venue full, which is because that's what happens with support bands. So we've probably got 10,000 people there already.
Yep.
And
that's a lot of people.
There's a lot of people there,
right?
And we're kind of going, what's going on here? And then kind of word comes back to us that the front of house guy is only getting lead vocal and one other thing, like a stereo mix of everything on stage.
Oh, no.
So he's not getting individual instruments.
Right.
So there's a lot of pressure on everyone.
Yeah.
To make this right and to get it happening fast.
Yeah.
So that we can do our 45-minute show.
Yeah.
So that everything still runs on time.
Yep.
And, so in the end, between the front of house guy and the stage crew, they just because of the way things were kind of patched, they basically got us up and running. By the sound guy literally only had this stereo mix, so he had to either text or phone messages to the stage crew to say, oh yeah, bring the kick drum down, bring the 5 dB, put the guitar up 5 dB, la 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 la. Our ears weren't affected because basically our ear mix was set and it wasn't affected. It was run
separate mix.
Yeah. But just the pressure and the stress that kind of environment was there at that time in that environment was hard. And I think once we kind of hit that first note and got the set started, it by no means was a perfect mix, and it was a tricky one to play. But I think the one of the final things that went through my head before we started was, there's nothing I can do about this except just have a good show. Like,
did you keep playing?
I did,
when the mics.
Well, see, that happened as she walked out, so it was before we even started playing.
Right.
Because she would walk out, she'd have a quick little chat before we even did a song. So she couldn't even have a little chat. So, we weren't going to play anything until she had her little chat. And so I just remember trying to almost laughing my way through that set. Because it couldn't have got much worse except if we lost our ears and our ear mix, then that would have been pretty much impossible to do the set. So I just remember having a massive smile on my face through that whole set, just trying to make eye contact with the guys in the band just to say, hey, we're doing this, we're going to get through, it's like just let's pretend nothing's wrong.
It's such an important thing you're touching on there is when you are on stage. I know, I've had times where something's going wrong.
Yes.
And in your mind, you're like, oh my God. But you go, hang on, I can't do a thing about it at the moment. So you just, smile and move on. And most people in the audience, they go, okay, something's up. But if you make a big deal out of it, and they're like, oh, well, something really is up. But if you're cool, then, okay, it gets fixed and you move on. So
I think, there's some things you can do a gig with and without, and then there's some things you can't do a gig without. And so on that one, fortunately for us, none of the playback, none of the stems or the backing tracks were affected. And for me, it's like if I didn't have click and if I didn't have some of the backing, then I couldn't do that gig. Even if I couldn't hear anyone else in the band, even if I couldn't hear the lead vocals, if I had click and that track, I can do the gig.
Do the gig.
So because I know my part, you know.
Yep.
And with those songs,
Yep.
nothing ever changed. It wasn't. There was no improvisation.
Right.
It was you played your part.
Play your part. Yeah.
Played the same thing for the 9 shows in Australia
Yeah.
and the two shows in New Zealand. You know,
Yep.
except for maybe the last show in New Zealand, I did probably
Right.
chop out a little
We
bit
chopped
more.
out. Yeah, cool. Yep. Awesome.
You know, last
Yeah.
show.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're in Christchurch.
Yep.
It was cold.
Yep.
Trying to warm up.
So Darran, you started playing at a very early age.
I did.
So you started playing when you were 13?
No, well, I started before that.
Right.
So
So you started doing paid gigs when you were 13?
yes,
Right.
yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So I don't ever remember not wanting to play the drums.
Right.
So just as a bit of background, mum and dad were both musical.
Okay.
I grew up going to church every Sunday.
Right.
And I just remember always watching, being just totally mesmerised with the drummer in church. Back then we went to this church that had like a band play, not just a organ or whatever. And basically I remember my first memory was kind of getting a tambourine when I was 4 years old and kind of learning how to play a tambourine in time. And then I bought, you'd bring it to church, play tambourine.
Yeah.
Sitting in the seat, not on the stage, and play tambourine. And then every other 4-year-old wanted to bring their tambourine and play, and so tambourines got banned. But it was 2 years later, when probably around this time of year. So my birthday's in August. It was around June when I was 6 years old. So just before my 7th birthday, we moved from where we were living at the time in Rockhampton to Maryborough.
Right.
The day we drove from Rockhampton to Maryborough, Mum and Dad bought me a drum kit.
Awesome.
From the drummer in the church.
Right, okay.
Yeah, he had some old kits, and so he put this old kit together for me. And poor parents had I had the snare drum in the car with me for the whole trip, which was probably a good 3.5, 4 hours.
Yeah.
And I can't remember how many times my mum had to tell me to. Can you stop playing that thing?
Play the snare in the car.
They'd already realised they'd made the wrong decision.
Oh, no, yeah.
But, so that drummer from the church came and stayed with us for a couple of weeks, for I think 2 weeks, and every day after school he'd just show me a drum beat.
Right.
He would go through my father's record collection, say, this is the record, this is the song, you play that drum beat to that song.
Right.
And then I was left on my own. He showed me like a 4/4 beat, a 3/4 beat, and a couple of other little things. And then from then on, it was all up to me. I taught myself.
Yep. So you were self-taught.
Self-taught until I was 17 and going to the Conservatorium of Music. I had some lessons. Right. From a local drummer in Maryborough who, to this day, is I count as a really good friend of mine. He would help me. Like, I didn't see him regularly. It was more like, okay, you're in the school band. Here's a piece of music, and I'm like, I don't know what that is. I need help with this. So he would help me with some of those parts of songs that I just wasn't. A good enough reader to know what to do. So.
Interesting you talk about being self-taught. Yes. Some of my past guests on here, we've spoken about nowadays we have access to so much information online. So if you're young and at home and you live in a remote area, if you have internet, you can still get access to quality information. But myself growing up in the 90s, I had a teacher, but everything I was learning was from books. Like tab books, exercise books. Did you have access to like any? Because VHS was a big thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, back then. So I had the Malmsteen. Here's how we shred. Like, did you have access to any other sources, or were you mostly listening and playing and trying to emulate what you see in magazines? Like, especially technique, because guitar is a big thing for technique, but I know drums is a huge thing for technique. I mean, you are more physically active than a guitar player. To do something like what Dave Lombardo does is a huge amount of energy. So I would assume that your technique is so important for something like that. Because to play at 220 beats a minute, well, if you're locking up, you're going to slow yourself down. So how did you learn your technique?
Yeah. Look, I think most of what I learnt, let's just say until I was 17, was firstly through reading magazines, like a Modern Drummer magazine.
Right.
Was huge at the time that I was, a teenager.
Yeah.
And then the other way was, as you said, VHS tapes. And so because I lived in a small town with not too many resources, I kind of, whenever we came to Brisbane, actually my mum was quite sick when I was a teenager, and so she would always be coming to Brisbane to see specialists or go to hospital or something. Right. So we found ourselves in Brisbane, quite a lot. So then I found out where all the music shops were, and then I would, mum and dad and my younger siblings would go off to the hospital. I'd be like, I'm going to walk down to the shop and I'll be there for the rest of the day. Just come and get me when you're done. Yeah. And so I would, have already befriended all of the, guys working in the drum departments. And so that was just a real eye-opener for me. And this is where I first kind of found, really good videos that I, saved up my busking money and basically started investing in these VHS. The first one I bought was from the Australian drummer Virgil Donati, and it was his VHS Obsessive Rhythms, which I set about trying to learn as much as I could from that. It came with a little booklet, which is long gone, but I did photocopy it before it disappeared. So I've got the photocopy somewhere. I did play that video so many times that pretty much the last time I put it in a machine, the audio was just like all over the shop. So but that video for me was a game changer, and it was at that kind of point where I started having these thoughts of maybe I could make playing drums a career, and I'm probably 15 at this time. The other influences at that time, and these were all through reading Modern Drummer magazine, was, Dave Weckl, Vinnie Colaiuta, all the usual suspects, Jeff Porcaro, Omar Hakim, John Robinson, Dennis Chambers, all of those guys that played pretty much jazz fusion, rock pop. And so then it was a little bit later where I started expanding my musical, tastes and what I listened to.
Scotty and I spoke a couple of weeks back about having your, for example, if someone thinks of a certain guitar player or drummer around town, they're like, oh yeah, he's a, country drummer, he's a rock drummer. When you were growing up, I mean, myself, I was metal, and that was it. Metallica. What were you growing up listening to?
So it's a funny little thing, in a way. When the world was going crazy over grunge music, I was playing jazz, and that's all I listened to. Just jazz drummers, jazz. So, but now, I don't know, I wouldn't consider myself any type of drummer. But back then, fortunately, I had two really good friends in high school, and they were both exceptionally good musicians for their age. Very intelligent, very smart, very talented. And we formed a little trio. When we were in grade 12, we recorded our own. We saved up our money. Well, it's a funny story because I'd already wanted. At 13 years of age, I'd been booked for just to record a backing track for a local singer. So I was 13. I remember playing the song through 3 or 4 times in the studio, and then we did it at night time. And I think it was a Friday night, so I'd been at school all day, and I just remember playing my thing, listening back to the playback, thinking, the drum sounds so cool, and then I fell asleep. And then while the rest of the band recorded their parts, I was so tired. But from that kind of just gave me this whole interest in recording, and so
I know you've played on 500
Well,
albums.
since then, yeah,
Right.
I've been.
That's stacks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'll talk about that in a minute. But
Yeah.
so I guess by the time I'm kind of finishing high school,
Yep.
it's like, yeah, I do want to become a session drummer as well.
Yep.
And I wanted to record something,
Yep.
and so I basically convinced,
Right.
persuaded
Yeah.
my two mates,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
to come into the studio
Yep.
with me. And so
Yep.
we basically did a 2-song demo,
Yep.
again, in the middle of the night,
Yep.
just so we could save money. And then a little while later we thought, let's do a whole album of jazz standards. So we did. The name of our little group was called Just Jazz.
Great.
And we named the album Kent Street Blues because Kent Street was the main street through
That's great.
through the town we lived in, through Maryborough. And it was fun. We did a lot of gigs around the place. And
What standards were on the album? Do you remember?
All of Me,
Yep.
When the Saints Go Marching In. We did a lot.
Oh, right.
We used to busk a lot and do.
Yeah.
We did a lot. One of the guys in the band had this Dixieland busking book,
Yep.
and so we did a lot of Dixieland stuff as well.
Yep.
We did. Okay, so this was around the time that James Morrison had released his album Snappy Doo,
Okay.
and where he'd multi-tracked himself, basically being a big band.
Right.
So we did the same thing on an arrangement of Take the A Train,
Right.
and because the other two guys in the band could play everything.
Yep.
So Scott, the sax player, he also played piano, but then he also played bass and any wind instrument.
Yep.
And then Andrew played guitar,
Yep.
piano. His main instrument was piano and French horn.
Yep.
So he could play all of the brass instruments.
So multi-layering.
So basically we had a 16-channel tape machine.
Yeah.
We did the drums and bass first. We bounced the drums down to 2 tracks and then just started layering these arrangements. And for the day, we're talking 16-year-old kids here doing these amazing arrangements of jazz standards. And, and I just played drums.
Yeah.
Oh, I did play a little bit of xylophone on a few tracks as well. So, but that just totally got my appetite up for, spending time in the studio recording and then which eventually moved into producing and engineering as well. So
I love hearing musicians talk about what was the pivotal moment where they said, I think I can do this, or I want to do this, and I want to do this regardless of what gets in my way. So hearing you talk about, recording the album, and then moving to Brisbane and then studying at the Queensland Conservatorium. Was that the sort of pivotal moment when you were recording the album? You were like, I think I can do this, or I want to make drums my living?
Yeah, I think at that stage it was a dream, for me. People talk about dreams or goals. It was a goal. I had no way of knowing how to get to that goal. And so when I was 17, moved to Brisbane, I had absolutely no idea of how to get there. I had no, clear pathway. It's like I'm just got to figure it out for myself. And so that I set about doing that. And again, a lot of my experience came through playing, every Sunday at church. And so through that, that's kind of the way I got into recording as well, because through that I met a lot of kind of like traveling artists who would just play at churches, as a guest kind of guest artist. And, so one of the actual first ever albums I played on as professional was still one of the best for me, and it was for a kind of like country rock artist. But the clientele on the other players on the album were what kind of made it so memorable. So the bass player on the album was George McArdle, who was ex-bass player from Little River Band. Come up with all of those iconic bass lines in those songs. And his feel and his timing and the taste in his playing is just amazing.
The LRB, the vocals always stick out, but the bass always sticks out.
You take George out of LRB, which did actually happen, and there goes, a majority of their tastiness and their groove and that. But so and then
how was that playing with
Yeah, good. See,
Yeah.
but I used to play with George every week because
Right.
like he would play at church.
Okay.
You know, at the church I went to, and so another one of the players on that, a guitar player called Adam Lester. So he's a Gold Coast
Yeah.
based guitarist. So he hasn't lived on the Gold Coast for years because he moved to Nashville
Right.
and started playing with Peter Frampton.
Right.
And you know, and now
I think I know his name
over
from,
there.
I could be wrong, just reading on credits and things, Dan Huff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So he's in that group of
Right.
people now.
Yep.
It's like,
Yep.
wow.
Yep.
And that, you know,
Yeah,
reading
yeah.
stories like that often made me wonder, you know, I've made a move from a little country
Yes.
town to a
Yes.
bigger country town
Yep.
in Brisbane.
Yep.
Maybe I should move to a city and,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
a proper city and
Yep.
see what happens. But I found a niche here in Brisbane and I've just kind of been doing it. Plus, you know, things happen along your journey that change the route you have to take on the journey, you know.
Yeah.
And so, you know, for me, I fell in love and, you know, got married and had kids pretty early on.
Right.
In the process or in my life. And so that changes things.
Yeah.
And the responsibility of being a husband and a father definitely changes your trajectory of what you do as a career. And, you know, so there was times where I would have to go and do things that weren't on my pathway to my goals.
Right. Yeah.
But, you know, I'd happily do that, you know, because I needed to provide for a growing family. You know.
How did you manage, because I know you've done a staggering amount of gigs, worked as a producer, touring, and you have five kids?
Oh, three. Three that I know about, yeah.
All right. For some reason I
could be five.
Sorry,
No.
you had three children, but it's still a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm one of three.
Yes.
So, I mean, managing family life, children, touring, gigging late nights in Brisbane. Yeah.
It was hard. You know, I didn't really start gigging heavily until my kids were a little bit older.
Okay.
So when they were young, I had a day job.
Yep.
It was doing music.
Yep.
But it was a day job. Sometimes where I was under the pump, you know, the hours would extend, and you know, so there was some weeks there where we were working on projects, live projects and television projects, where I would work an 80-hour week.
Wow.
And you know, that's
huge.
That's a huge week when you got little kids at home and a wife who just needs a break, you know. And so that they were really hard times, you know, just trying to navigate that time. And but I would get, you know, I would do whatever I could physically do, and there'd be times where, like, I would be at a family gathering and I would just fall asleep because I was just totally, you know, been working full on the night before or the days leading up to that, and then just it's the first chance where I don't know, you know. So I feel like, you know, I missed out on some things. You know, there was times where I couldn't go to families' birthdays or, you know, things because I was at work.
Yeah, musicians, I know the feeling, but a lot of musicians always talk about like how many things we've missed and how your groups of friends change.
Yeah.
You know, when you
that's
start
true.
gigging full time, your friends hang out on weekends. Well, you're gigging,
That's
and then
right.
Monday, Tuesday is your weekend.
Yeah. So that is definitely true, and it's a funny thing because, like, I often reflect back on, you know, who's my best friend, but it's like I don't really have a best friend, and I don't really have a lot of friends that I will hang out with when I have spare time, because most of my friends are the people I work with, and when I'm working, I'm kind of hanging out with my friends because you know there's all of those hours in a green room where you're waiting for speeches to end and the dessert to come out so you can go and play your party set. So it's but it's like I have a few guys that I consider really good friends, and but I'm not good at, like, I don't ring them every day. I don't. You know, it's,
Comes with the musician lifestyle. Doesn't it? Let's talk about your kit. So what have you bought today?
Well, I just bought this little 18-inch kick drum and a snare drum and some little things just in case we were going to play something, or if I needed to show some examples. So one thing that you touched on before was, you mentioned a little bit about technique and that. So when I had those initial lessons from the old church drummer, I was taught to hold the sticks and match grip. But then every drummer, when I was 13 years old, every drummer I idolised held their drumsticks with traditional grip. And so at that point, I'm like, I'm going to change my technique from match grip to...
So playing jazz, you never started
traditional
grip?
No.
Right.
But by the time I'd finished high school, I only played traditional grip. So, and again, it was like I had to teach myself how to do that. And it's a little bit of a weird grip because... it feels weird the very first time you try to play drums doing it. So it's like I had to relearn the left hand. Not that I'd progressed much in, by the time I was, at this time I was like 15, 16 years old. So that got quite comfortable after a while of doing it. And there were certain things that I could do better with traditional grip with my left hand. And there was other things that kind of were a bit more of a challenge. So, but yeah, like I now I'm back to I'm back to match grip now. Like I don't play traditional grip anymore. There is a very specific reason for that. And so I guess in 2004, I was doing a session in New South Wales at a studio called The Grove Studios. I think Silverchair recorded there.
That's what I'm thinking. That's very familiar with that name.
Yes, I was doing a session down there for a Queensland artist. She just happened to have a connection down there, so we all went down there and recorded. And it was one of those things where we would stay the night and spend a couple of days recording. I remember kind of waking up on the second day, going in and playing through the first song for that day. And then just all of a sudden, just having my hands feel like pins and needles. And I had lost all control, couldn't grip the sticks. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know why it happened or what. But, down the track, after seeing doctors, physios, it became obvious that it was carpal tunnel. So I had a nerve conduction study done by a professional doctor who does those things. The nerve conduction guy. That guy. So he says, look, you've got it in your both hands, carpal tunnel in both hands, and it's very severe in your right hand. And so I went
playing drums. Is this?
So yes, and looking back now, I can kind of see why it happened. Because I was doing a lot of things wrong. That I probably wouldn't have been doing wrong if I'd seen a teacher. Constantly, through my years of playing and learning. But if you think, I would get up and, at this stage, so in 2004, I am 30 years old. And so I'd done a lot of gigs and a lot of sessions. I was my favourite sticks and that I'd use all the time at that particular time were a brand called Regal Tip, and they were the Jeff Porcaro signature drumstick. And I loved them because I had this great little acorn tip on the end, which sounds really sweet on the cymbals. And they were thin and light and, but for the type of music I was playing at the time and to the size of, I was doing gigs for quite large audiences. So playing quite heavy or hard, they were just too small, those sticks. They were too small, too light. And so that was one thing. There's a few things. The stick. The second thing was...
I didn't know sticks could... I guess it then makes sense. Would you be using too much effort because they're light?
Exactly right. And gripping, because they're smaller and thinner, you're gripping them more. So, and then it was also not only just a stick thing, but because of that, a technique thing. But then there was two other kind of factors that I thought about later that kind of really contributed to developing carpal tunnel. The second thing was the fact that I would get up and play, and I still do this now, and I've really got to, think about it before I get up and play. But I'll just get up and play.
Right.
No warm up.
Okay.
No stretching. Nothing. Yep. And so if as a teacher, I'm always teaching my students stretch, warm up. Here's some things you can do when you're not on the drum kit to make sure you're ready to play when you're ready to play. So if you think about a sprinter or any athlete, there's a time of stretching and warming up and doing drills before they even get on the field to compete or to do their whatever they're doing. Yeah, like if you think about how physical playing drums are, especially when you're playing big crowds and you're really putting everything into it. It's very physical. And to get up there and do that from zero, no warm up, nothing, it's going to do something to your body. Something's got to give.
Right.
And then the third thing was I'd kind of realised to have a career in music as a drummer, I had to do more than just be a drummer. And so one of the things I did was I started playing percussion.
Right.
So, and I got a lot of gigs playing percussion because at the time there wasn't many around, but everyone wanted a percussionist in their band. So it was really good as far as income goes. But again, I never got lessons.
Yep.
So here I am playing congas with really incorrect technique.
Okay.
Just bashing them, trying to get out some sound out of them.
Yeah. What is the technique for congas? I mean, I have no idea, but is there a... because I've always wondered, I'm like, kind of hurts,
Yes.
like you'd be doing it.
It's a funny thing. Like there's different sounds you can get out of a conga. So if luckily I did bring a conga today. So I'll show you what I know. And again, like I will say, I've never had a lesson from a conga player on how it's only from what I've seen on instructional videos. And so there's different sounds, but one thing that I guess I learnt was the style of percussion I played was never going to be Latin or salsa or anything like that. It was just like a pop percussionist, And so most of the time you only need a couple of sounds for that. And so one is you kind of like a muted sound where your hand is just literally on the skin. Like that. There's the open sound, so it's the same technique again, but you're just letting the hand come off the skin. And then you've got this slap sound, so or a pop sound. If I was using both hands, then you could do the pop sound with your right hand like that. Gets that sound. And you can kind of develop that similar sound in your left hand by kind of doing that. So I
That is so cool.
So you kind of learn how to piece together a little rhythm. And even then, like what I just played then is nothing like if you had a professional conga player in here playing that. There'd be so much more feel and the correct techniques, and you really actually see the difference.
Cool.
But
so that hurt your hands.
Well, see, back when I was first starting, I could never play those techniques like that, and get that kind of sound. So as I said, I was kind of just bashing congas, trying to get what I thought was the right sound. And so again, that's kind of putting a lot of pressure on your hands, a lot of stress on. And so eventually, that little carpal tunnel area that your nerves run through to your fingers swells up and constricts. It's like it just chokes the nerves. And that's what happens. And so the only way you can fix that is by getting an operation where they cut the ligature, they cut the carpal tunnel, and it just opens up and releases all that pressure. So
you had an operation?
I didn't.
No,
what I did was I did a lot of reading. And so and funnily enough, in the Modern Drummer magazines, I went back and found a magazine from like the late 80s with an article about carpal tunnel in it. So I read that. And then I got reading other things.
Yeah.
And then I basically spent a lot of time with a physio, learning proper stretching, proper warm-ups, getting some acupuncture. And through that treatment, I got to a point where I could play the drums without any really bad consequences or symptoms. So no fingers going numb, no loss of the technique or control of the drumstick. But I did have to do a few things.
Right.
So that's when I switched back to match grip.
Okay.
I used to sit very low and have everything very high.
Okay.
So I just reversed that.
Totally
I thought
rock
if
and
I'm
roll.
sitting higher, cymbals low, drums low. That way I feel like I've got more control. I don't have to reach for things, and everything's at just a really easy distance to hit. And then I changed my drumsticks. So
what are you
drumsticks are usually made out of hickory wood, which is very dense, and obviously the more dense a wood is, the more vibration it contains. So I changed my drumsticks to maple, obviously a softer wood, which means there's potential there to go through or break drumsticks a lot quicker. But immediately I noticed a difference, and then also I changed to big, thick drumsticks. Because maple is a lighter wood, less dense. Even going to a thicker drumstick, it didn't make the drumstick feel heavier than what I was used to. So, so those two things: sitting higher, drums low, change of sticks, kind of relearning the technique again because I went back to match grip. That helped. I kind of reset my mind a little bit on getting more economy out of my movement on the drums, which meant rather than using arms, I'm using more wrists and fingers. And so that's what I set about doing, just becoming more, having more economy of movement in what I do. And so that's 20 years ago. It'll be in December this year that I will have had carpal tunnel for 20 years.
That is brilliant, and I love hearing stories about how someone got injured, had to change technique. Because guitar isn't as physically demanding as drums is, but I teach a lot of guitar. And I am huge on technique. Number one, because I know guitar is pretty foolproof, but I do know guys that get tennis elbow from just picking locked arms too much. Left hand, I've been doing bar chords like this, but I've been pulling my pinky back as well.
It causes,
And there's always two schools of thoughts, lots of reading articles. It's like, as long as you're having fun, whatever. And I go, that's great. But at some point when you want to play something very technical, you want to play Slayer, you want to shred like Malmsteen, those guys spend a lot of time on their technique, so they use as little energy as possible so you can play faster. And hearing you talk about playing more economical, I am such a big fan of almost the science behind, if I move this less each time, well, I can play faster. But every time if I'm moving this far, it's going to slow me down. So how long were you playing drums before you had to change technique? Because I was 7 years in, and James Sherlock changed my picking technique. And I stuck with it, but it was points I was like, man, no, I can't do it. I'm just going to, I used to drag across on the strings, but he changed it to make sure it's parallel. It took a good year. So how long, was this, do you have to persist with this change of technique?
It took a while. Like for all of pretty much most of 2005. So I know definitely it happened December 2004. I kind of took 6 months off. I didn't even think in my head it would be 6 months. I was just going to kind of take off time until I felt that I could get back on and play without any symptoms manifesting while I play. So it ended up being around 6 months. And at that time, I was still working a day job in the, doing some music. And basically where I worked, we had a studio, and so I managed the studio, and I was doing sessions through there and working on music for some TV things
Yep.
and live shows. But so I could still, earn a living while I wasn't earning a living
Yep.
with the drums.
Yep.
But I decided to, it was around that time.
Yep.
I don't know why I was thinking this at this time. Oh, actually I do. Things got a little bit political where I was working and I was not enjoying it anymore. And so it's just like, maybe I could do what I'm doing here, but for myself.
Right.
And so I had a really good friend who I worked with there. He'd already left about a year before. And so we've been talking about, doing our own thing.
Yep.
Like music production for TV, live shows,
Yep.
even doing, he was a bit of a video guy, so, doing wedding videos and things like that. Anything we could do to draw an income in.
Yep.
And so I kind of talked to him about it, gave him my resignation letter, and then we'd gone and bought ourselves, I'd gone into some serious debt and bought on finance a brand new Apple Mac G5 computer, cinema screen, cinema display, everything. Yep. The cinema display itself was $2,500,
super
and I'm
hot.
like, why did I spend that money on that screen where I could have just bought it? Anyway, this is 2005, so everything Apple. If you wanted it, power, you had to pay so much.
But they were the go-to.
Yeah, and I used those tools. 3 years later, when I'm living in Hong Kong, I flew basically that whole system over. But I've kind of jumped the gun there. So the guy I was going into business with, he was the same age as me. He was married to a girl an American girl who he'd met when he lived in Hong Kong years before. And so she's a teacher. He's not getting any work in at the moment. She gets offered a job teaching in Hong Kong. And so just as we're just about to start our own business, he's like, we're moving to Hong Kong. And I'm like, what? Anyway, to kind of, there's a couple of interesting things that happen in this whole journey. And one is the day that I'm at the airport saying goodbye to him, I get a phone call and it's one of the musicians guys I know who plays and tours with the Ten Tenors. And he's like, Darran, you interested in playing with the Ten Tenors on the Australian tour? And I'm like, when is it? It's like September. And this is like a couple of months away.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, I sure am. So I basically become Ten Tenors' first touring drummer. And before that, they were just using backings with a pianist and a keyboard player who played a bit of auxiliary percussion and other things. So it was a great tour. Like I loved it. It was amazing. It taught me a lot. I learnt a lot on that one because it's the first time I had to play the same thing every night. It's all charted. Everything was charted. Everything. No improvisation except for like an 8-bar drum solo you get in one of the songs at the end. But the Ten Tenors after their Australian tour were heading over to the States and then to Europe. And I asked the question, so who's playing drums in the States, who's playing drums? And they're like, oh no, we're just going back to the tracks, backing tracks. And I'm like, if I can do the States and Europe, would you have me do it? And so basically through that, it kind of came back to, well, it's too late for us to get you for the States because you have to get a visa and do all that application process. So it was too late to do that. So basically the bass player, Jeremy O'Connor and I got basically flown into Frankfurt, into Germany, and we did a whole 5 weeks in Europe with the tenors. And then after that, by that time, they decided that they couldn't go back to just doing backing tracks, so they wanted to always tour with the bass player and the drummer, which at that point I was offered, a full-time role with the Ten Tenors. Also, while I was in Amsterdam with the Ten Tenors, I get an email from Wayne, who'd moved with his wife and family to Hong Kong. Hey, Darran, I've got this really cool idea and I've got someone who's going to finance it and la-da-da-da-da. Can you come to Hong Kong? And at this point, I've got 3 small kids at home. I've been away for 5 weeks. The wife is, pulling her hair out. I just said to Wayne, I said, look, because he wanted me to basically get off the tour and come straight to Hong Kong.
Right.
We got home from that tour on Christmas Eve, 2005. And basically my reply to him was, I don't think the wife's going to really want to have me gone for another X amount of days after being. So the next interaction I have from him, which is another email, says, okay, so I've booked you and your wife on a flight to Hong Kong. And so basically I'm home for Christmas Day, Boxing Day. The wife and I flying out to Hong Kong for we spend New Year's Eve there, and I come home with a job. I come home with a music production job where I'm just creating music for a Hong Kong market.
Right.
I'm flying there 4 times a year. And then eventually in 2008 we have built a big enough clientele and we've secured a premises in central Hong Kong where we've built our own studio and basically media production business.
Drumming?
No, I'm engineering and producing.
Right.
And so, so we start, I moved the family over in 2008, sell the house. Things are going great. It was hard to get the kids in school. Just all that stuff was difficult because it's a different country and they had to go to international schools and they were expensive and they had a waiting list. And so, there's a lot of frustration there. But, the business started going really well. We were working on, advertising campaigns for Mercedes-Benz and Rugby Sevens and, a whole bunch of things. But then, I don't know if you remember at the end of 2008, there was the financial crisis and that hit us really hard because Hong Kong's a high finance city, everything's based around finance. And so a lot of the accounts we had just closed their budgets, closed their advertising budgets, and we had nothing coming in. And so we basically, that was the end of us. I had to move back home. And so fortunately, this was good and bad. Because of that financial crisis, no banks would even consider giving me a loan to buy a house again. And we had a great deposit in the bank because we'd sold our house before. No, sorry, I know you've got more than what we need for a deposit, but you don't have a full-time job.
Right.
And I'm like, so basically I invested the money into building, buying my own gear and kind of building my own little studio underneath a rented house. So that was fun. But, I worked out of there for years and produced some cool little albums. And then in the end, when that work dried up, I just thought, I'm just going to sell off the gear I don't need, keep my mics, keep my preamps, and I'll just record wherever I can find a room when people need me to record. And so I've kind of built a business out of doing that now. And
with production and engineering, because I know you've done a lot of recording. And one thing when I'm behind a console and I have engineered, how do you turn off the drum brain and then get into this engineering brain? I was found, like, if I'm engineering, I become the worst guitar player. And if I was playing session guitar playing, it's like, don't ask me to engineer because I find them very different headspaces. Do you find that, or is it?
I've always been wanting to be just more than a drummer. And I realized that early on that to make a full-time career in music, I couldn't just be a drummer. And that became extremely evident through the COVID thing, where all my drummer mates who were only just drummers, had no work. And fortunately for me, because I had diversified, my talent set or my skill set, I could still draw an income from online teaching and, doing sessions. I did so many sessions through the COVID era because I had my gear set up in a room that I taught in and I just put the word out. Hey, any songwriters, bands want some drums, send me your tracks and I'll, and so I just, it was just like every day I'd come in, record a couple of tracks for people, go home, edit them, and then send them off, send the invoice. But, through that, I mean, I started the diversification process probably back when Just Jazz recorded that album,
Right.
and I could see how a musical arrangement came together when Andrew and Scott and I did that big band arrangement of Take the A Train. And so I virtually through the process of getting gigs and becoming a session musician, learnt what it takes to actually pull an arrangement together for a song. And then through that job I had in the music production suite, and working on music for TV and commercials, so you build up the things, the tools you need and rely on, and the things you go to arrange a song. And through that, it was like, I know what drums are supposed to sound like, so that's a no-brainer. I know where to put my kind of drum kit to make it sound good. And I know how to tune a drum kit. Right. Sometimes that is the battle.
Tuning and
just getting a good tune, a well-tuned drum kit.
There's an art to.
Oh, there is
with some of that R&B, EDM. If you are using like a hybrid kick drum with a program kick drum, and EDM guys tune their kick drums. So if it's the key of E, it'll be an E. But then using a real drum kit, tuning that. That's a real fine.
Oh yes.
To make sure, like if you want an E, and
a
few hertz either side. And
it's a funny thing. Like there's only been a few times where I've been asked to tune my drums, and sometimes there was once where I got asked to tune congas to specific notes. I'm like, okay, cool. Most drums, depending on their size and their depth, they have a range of notes where their resonance and their tone sound the best. And then if you get outside of that range, they sound either too choked or just lifeless, no tone, no resonance. So again, it's about, when I'm packing the car for a session, it's about knowing what to put in the car. I'm going to need a smaller kick or a bigger kick for this. Well, I need lower, higher. And so I used to turn up to sessions with sometimes up to 8 snare drums, just depending on, and all of them are different. At one time I owned 21 snare drums, and then I realised there's a whole bunch there that I was never using. And so I just started kind of selling them off. But I probably have 4 now that are my go-to snare drums. I have more than that. But there's 4 that I'll use on a kind of depending on what I need. And again, like it's that all my snare drums are different. It's a different wood, different size. Some of them are metal.
You're like touring. When you're on tour, say for Evermore, Guy Sebastian, Toni Childs. Is there a go-to kit, much the same as like I don't know if this is a silly question, but if a guitar player has to play a pop tune, a funk tune, and a rock tune all in the one night, take a Telecaster. It seems to do the trick across all styles. Is there a certain kit or certain size that sort of gets you out of trouble for a variety of styles, even if it's a live gig here in Brisbane? Or I mean, is it
again? It's I kind of treat gigs like I treat a session, and basically try to take what I think would best suit the gig. So in this drum kit here, this is I'm very fortunate through the journey of my career to have been become a Yamaha endorser and pasty cymbal and Vader drumsticks, and that's a part of doing what you do. It's I'm very blessed to be able to represent these brands and play them. So when I ordered this drum kit, originally I just ordered like the normal kind of toms, 10, 12, a 14-inch full tom and a 16-inch full tom and a 22-inch kick drum. I didn't order the snare drum for it, and I didn't order this. This is a little 18-inch kick.
Right.
But I heard another Yamaha endorser on a gig when I was in Melbourne once, and he had this little 18-inch kick, and it just sounded mint.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm going to order it. So when I got back to Brisbane, I was on the phone to Yamaha saying, can I please order a 18? So this does probably 90% of my live gigs, just because it's so small and easy.
Yep.
But I guess that at the time I ordered this drum kit, I was doing so many weddings.
Right.
Like wedding gigs were, I was doing 2 a week at the minimum.
Yeah.
And so I thought that's why I got the Silver Sparkle. I thought you want to
nice and shiny,
shiny drum kit, festive, whatever, happy, and so the Silver Sparkle was the color I chose. And, the 18, like I'll give it a little kick, and sometimes it can sound. It depends on the room and mic, and sometimes it sounds a little bit. Like it looks small and thin, but if you get the right head skin combination on it, the hole at the front definitely determines how much low end and resonance you get out of the kick. I have a slight little like blanket in there, it's one of those really soft blankets, so it's not thick and heavy. It's just light. And on this batter side, I've got an Evans EMAD, which has got a little bit of muffling built in. So those kind of heads give you bigger and deeper sound out of a smaller drum. So this is my little 18. And I would say probably at the time, right now, I've got it. That's kind of how I'd have it tuned for most gigs, just so it has some punch.
Sounds great.
Yeah. It has punch.
It's tight and punchy.
It's tight, And a lot of venues I play, they don't want big drums. They don't want loud-sounding drums. So this kind of
40 hertz coming from a kick drum.
Yeah. This kind of works for most gigs around the place. But even like on last week, I did a corporate gig, and normally for a corporate gig, I'd bring the 22-inch, the bigger bass drum. But the last few times I've done corporate gigs, I've taken this one, 10-inch tom, 14-inch tom, and it's been great. It's fine, like the sound guys are like, it sounds sweet. So it's great.
When you were recording drums
yes.
In your studio, what was your setup? Did you have certain type of microphones, preamps that you were going to?
Oh, yeah, look, at the time, it was basically whatever I could afford. And like, this is going to be, what I'll say in a few minutes is going to be very cringe, but I'm going to tell you the pathway I'm using right now.
Sure.
But over the years, I kind of looked at a few things and I guess I'm at the point now where I'm ready to upgrade to the next step of definitely microphones and preamps.
Right.
So like when I record for people, and if I'm not mixing it or engineering or doing the final mix, my idea is to give them as many options as possible.
Right.
So at the moment, I've got a 16-channel.
Yes.
It's actually 18-channel interface, so I can do 18 mics, and I do. So I'll have 3 on the kick, one inside. One like you can see here. Well, actually, right now we've got one on the inside. We've got the AKG D12. So that if I'll hit it again. Hopefully we can just solo that mic and we'll see if that happens. But this is the AKG that's inside the kick drum. And then I'll have the exact mic that's at the hole in the front head, which is Beta 52.
Right.
And then I have this microphone that Yamaha developed called a sub kick.
Okay.
And so it looks like a small drum. And it just sits on a stand at the front, in front of the head. Right. And basically it's there just to do what it says, collect, it records here's the lower frequencies. And so I always do that kind of miking for the kick. That just gives whoever's mixing it, if they might just want the one, then they've got it. But they might want the sub kick for something. They might want a bit more attack or a bit more. So they get that with the internal mic. And, on snare, I just do the normal kind of like top and bottom.
57.
And toms. So toms, if I'm using a 5-piece kit or a 4-piece kit, which means either 2 toms here and 1 tom there, or 1 tom there and 2 toms here, or whatever. I have a bunch of Shure KSM 27s, so they're kind of a large diaphragm condenser mic. So I found they sound really nice on toms. I saw a few producers, through different documentaries and that have used them. And
when you said cringeworthy,
so I'm getting to that.
Well,
yes.
A lot of people, they talk about, this was cheap gear, or even like this is a cheap guitar.
Yeah.
And it's so funny when you hear about, say, the first Eddie Van Halen album, just all dynamic microphones.
Yeah.
There's no condenser microphones.
Wow.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you know the tools you're using, you can get great sounds.
Right.
Yeah. Because there's plenty of expensive microphones in a bad room, bad singer, bad whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it comes back to like what I said before about, you've got to start with a good sounding instrument. So if your drums are in tune, or that's half the battle won already. And so then your mics are really there not to really color anything, but actually capture the sound, the original sound. And so the source has to sound good to start with. But totally right. But I'm getting to the cringe,
right?
And it's not even cringe. But so that's probably most of the drums. Overheads, I'll use, because this is all I've got at the moment, but just some Rode NT2As.
Yeah.
And then I'll close mic hats and ride cymbal.
Okay.
Just sometimes the ride gets a little bit lost in the definition of the overhead. So I'll put a mic on that, and I'm just using some condenser mics, small pencil condenser mics for that. And then I have two more KSM 27s that I use for room mics, and one Neumann. It's my best microphone, a TLM 149 that I use as a kind of mono room. It's kind of a meter in front of the kick, but it's kind of to pick up everything.
Trash can mic?
Yeah. Well, My kind of thought is that it just might get a little bit more body of everything, but that's what I just put those mics up and off it, and that's what I send off to whoever I'm tracking drums for.
So I meant by trash can mic of like taking that clean recording and then compressing the heck out of it and making that mono distorted mic up in the middle.
But
not that the mic's a trash can.
No. The other thing I've done in the past, and right now I don't think I have a way of doing this, but I'm going to investigate. So just to give some context, I'm about 2 or 3 weeks away from finishing my own studio build.
And it's called?
It's called The Rage Cage.
The Rage Cage. I love it.
It's a great name that my partner Belinda gave it, and I won't explain why, but it's quite funny.
I'm coming for a lesson.
The Rage Cage, we can rage all you want in there, but anything below 80 hertz will still be heard outside just a little bit.
Okay.
It's not quite soundproof yet, which is a little bit of a disappointment, but that's all right. Once that's done, then I'll work towards kind of upgrading some mics, upgrading my interface and pre's. At the moment, I find this hugely funny because none of the producers I've sent drums to, none of the engineers have ever even questioned the pre's or the interface. So at the moment, I'm using a Behringer X Air 18 as my interface and preamps. And
Behringer's always had this bad rap. But remember those DIs, those little silver DIs?
Yeah, I've got one of those somewhere,
$50 back in the day. And, I've dropped one in water.
Yeah, wow.
Still works.
Wow.
They were just, but that's great what you've got there. Yeah.
So it works, and no one can tell. That's what I've got. I guess they are spec to have Midas preamps in there, which I believe they do. But it's still there's that little bit of a stigma to Behringer. But from what my interaction and my use of Behringer, they're great.
Yeah.
And here's an example. Maybe it was 2019.
Yep.
The music arranger and at the time when I was with the Ten Tenors, he was the music director, Stephen Baker. Okay. He'd since moved to London and was working there, producing and arranging for different projects and things and people. He sends me 3 tracks to record drums on.
Yep.
And So I open up the audio that he's given me, and I'm like, gee, that sounds like a real orchestra.
Right.
So the tracks I was doing was for a like pop opera kind of crossover artist, a male artist. Don't know his name. I never do. Like people just send me tracks, and it's like I just do what they ask me to do. So I'm like, I'm email Stephen, is this a real orchestra? He's like, yeah, that's the London Symphony Orchestra. And I'm like,
VST?
No, real.
Yeah.
In a room.
Okay.
Mics.
Wow.
In a room.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he told me a little bit about the session.
Yeah.
I'm like, it was a Sony artist.
Okay.
So there was money behind it.
Yeah.
I'm like, why am I doing drum tracks in Brisbane with Behringer preamps?
Right. Okay.
For this album that's going to be, released on Sony. I didn't tell him what the signal path was or anything. He just got the tracks back.
Yeah.
These sound amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Do you know Warren Hewitt?
No.
He talks about, the Fray, How to Save a Life and Over My Head.
Yeah.
That was recorded in his garage with a tack Scorpion desk.
Wow.
And, recorded well.
Yep.
Used the space.
Yep.
Mixed by Mark. And it's, I don't think, I've heard, you can hear the drums in there. Sounds amazing.
And I think it says a lot for the mixing process, doesn't it? Like just the little tricks that you get someone who knows what they're doing, and you can make something that was probably recorded fairly averagely and questionably sound like a $1 million record. And actually, I should just backtrack a little bit. I wanted to be that guy who was an expert at everything. So in the early days, I would produce, engineer, drum, and mix, and try and master everything I did. I'm like, sometimes it was out of necessity because there wasn't budget to send. But once I started working on projects with budget for someone else to mix it, that's when I realized that maybe there's you have more strength in getting people involved in your projects that are really good at what they do.
100%. Yeah.
And it was at that point that a lot of the things I was producing started sounding way better than I could have ever done myself, And I'm like, that taught me a very valuable lesson,
On that, I think, because you're talking about how, you want to be more than just a drummer because, making money, I think everyone's very much the same now, especially like 2024, being a bit of a jack of all trades because making money is hard in the music industry. But with your skill set, as you just mentioned, moving on to say, it's, don't want to use the word better, but working with other people who are like really good at one thing and you bring your skill set and you get a much better result. But having your skill set, do you think that enables you then to work better with those people who, if you're doing an EDM track and, maybe you've been producing EDM for X amount of time, but you go and find someone who's been doing it for 30 years, having your understanding of what they do, does it help working?
100%. And actually, I've got a very good story on that one. One of the first things I did when I came back in 2005 to Australia from that little meeting in Hong Kong, one of the first jobs I did was I produced this album to release in Hong Kong. And because we had a financial backer, there was money there to, record in some nice studios. And so I tracked my drums in the old Grevillea studios in Brisbane. I have no idea if they're still there anymore. But that was great sound there, recorded the bass there and some guitars. And when it came to the mixing, Wayne in Hong Kong and I talked about this mix engineer in Melbourne. And we knew him through the church circles. And he is also the reason why I know Guy Sebastian.
Right.
So this guy, he's absolute legend guy, Henry Seeley.
Okay.
And he was kind of like one of those guys which was jack of all trades, but also master of all trades, like one of those guys. So brilliant guitarist, amazing vocals, great songwriter, But then you get him behind a desk, and he was just a whiz. And so at the time, he'd set up his own facility in Melbourne and had a nice big SSL console there, and but charged $1,000 a song and mixed one song a day. So I had a 10-track album, Melbourne for 2 weeks, $10,000 to just get the thing mixed. But I sat there every day and watched him and learnt from him. At the time, he was like, "Have you gridded the drums?" And I'm like, "What do you mean grid the drums?" I'm like, "Have you put them into time?" So he gave me a crash course and this was before Pro Tools had elastic audio. He just gave me a quick rundown on Beat Doctor. Is that what it's called? Yeah, Beat Detective. And basically, so he did the first song, showed me what to do. While he was mixing the first song, I went and got started on kind of, and so I learned a lot just from, how to prep for a mix just by being with him. But then I learned so much about mixing by watching.
Over the shoulder.
And asking questions.
It's funny hearing people watching over mix engineers' shoulders, especially on consoles, and talking about, I couldn't believe how many red lights there were.
Oh, yeah.
But they're like, it didn't sound distorted, but, overdriving preamps.
So just to kind of put a little nice ending on that story, Henry now lives with his wife and kids in Nashville. And it's probably a few years ago now, maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago. He won a Grammy Award for a mix of an album that he did for a Christian artist. So, amazing.
That's awesome.
What a journey. And the way that Guy Sebastian works in this, so Henry was originally from Adelaide, which is where I met him because the group that he was playing in, they were doing a tour up the east coast of Australia. He couldn't, their drummer couldn't do it. And so somehow they got, through the grapevine, they got in contact with me. And so I did this tour with these guys from Adelaide for a couple of weeks. This is back in the 90s, back, late 96 it was. And so ever since that time, I'd maintained really good friendship with them. Every now and then when I found myself in Adelaide, I'd kind of be with them. And that's when I meet this 18-year-old kid called Guy Sebastian. And you could, as soon as this guy sang, you could tell he that. There's nothing like that. There's no what. And then years later he turns up on Australian Idol, and then the rest is history. Somehow in 2018, I get a call from a really good friend of mine, Mark Perrick, who's bass player. Again, super talented guy. He's amazing. Guy and Mark's like, just got a phone to Guy. Would you be interested in doing some gigs with him? I'm like, yes. Of course I would be.
No.
And so I kind of found myself in this situation of filling in for Guy's drummer whenever Andy couldn't do a gig, because Andy in his own right is a superstar drummer. He's amazing. Plays with Pete Murray. Obviously Guy. And he spent time in England and played with, I think it was the Sugar Babes. He was their drummer, over in England. So anyway, so I'm happy to be the fill-in drummer.
How was playing with Guy Sebastian? I saw some video of you at the, correct me if I'm wrong, Australian Tennis Open. Australian Open. But also some of the big seated places you were playing in. I mean, you play around town, and we play in pubs, and capacity is 500 maybe at a big one. Playing to thousands of people. How's that?
It's great. It's. I don't think I approach it any differently. Those gigs, because the thing is, it's a set. It's a set part. I'm not expected to come up with something on the spot. There's no pressure there. So you learn the songs and you just play the songs. And again, we've got click and some backing in the ears, and as long as that's there, then I am good. the challenging, like it's not a technically hard show to play. The challenge is just reading Guy and the rest of the band and, you know, kind of fitting in as if you always play that gig. You know, so that's, and it's kind of a little bit about the hang as well, you know. It's like you want to be a good fella, you know, and easy to get along with. And
when you talk about the parts not being overly technical or complex, I hear students often say, you know, oh, I'm just learning something simple at the moment, or you know, drum student going, oh, we're just doing simple stuff like Back and Black. And I go, you know, it's simple, but if we hear like someone like Phil Rudd play Back and Black, the groove that he's doing, that's challenging, isn't it? So just to diverse a little bit, when I was growing up, I was obsessed with drums.
Me too.
As a guitar player, I had a phase where I was obsessed with Grant Collins.
Oh, yes.
Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater.
Oh, wow.
And Vinnie Paul from Pantera. Two reasons. One was they wrote really cool like drum riffs and parts of it, like, like, you know, Intro to 6 O'Clock by Dream Theater. Grant Collins' Dog Boy. But the other thing too was their groove, I always noticed. So someone like Portnoy that was fully technical, but there was this groove and swagger. And I always wonder, like, can you teach groove? When I hear the word groove, I always think of drums. I mean, obviously you groove as a guitar player, you groove as a bass player, but most of the time we're playing with the drummer and we're trying to lock with you. Because there's nights where I play, I go, man, I'm not grooving tonight. And other nights you're like, I'm grooving. And you go, can you teach groove? Especially with drums.
I don't think, like, groove is not, it's not something you can give to someone. You can't really teach it. You can discuss it and talk about what makes a groove. And you can get your students to think about it. And I think the more you can equip them with examples of a good groove and talk about, you know, what you can do to create a good groove. And then it's up to them to go and practice and develop that groove. So when I moved to Brisbane, I kind of did my study at the con, and then I didn't really join any bands in that time that I was a member of. But then I got a call one day from a friend saying, hey, we're putting this little trio together. We're going to dominate the world with covers. And that never happened. But like this was one of those moments in my life where it kind of just opened my eyes up to a new thing. And so Matt, the bass player, Matt Cause, he got me around to his place. He made me set up drums and pretty much exactly what I got here, just a kick, snare, hats. That's all he wanted me to bring. I'm like, cool. And he had a drum machine. And so he basically just said, you're going to sit here and play the same groove to this drum machine and develop your time, and you're going to develop your feel, and you're going to develop your sound. And so he kind of sat with me for a while, then he'd go and make a coffee. And so I'm here just sitting, playing these really, you know, for me it was boring, but it was essential that I did this. Because he was like, you better be, you know, thinking about every single drum hit you're doing on the snare drum to make it sound exactly the same. You want consistency. You know, that was one thing that Jeff Porcaro was, you know, famous for, was his snare drum sound. Like you listen to the snare, where he placed it, the consistency at which he hit it, the way it was tuned, the way it sounded. That's Jeff Porcaro right there, all in that snare drum, you know. So that I spent a couple of days at Matt Cause's place just working on grooves, working on balancing the sound of the drum kit, kick, snare, and hats, working on getting a consistent snare drum hit, because that's a hard thing to do. And that's, you know, one of the things that most guys who think they want to become session musicians, like I've had so many students over the years, I want to become a session musician. I want to become a touring drummer. It's like, do you know what you have to do to become that? You know, what's the first thing? No idea. Oh, I just go in there and play and record and no. It's like you need to kind of get your shit sorted out. Sorry about the word. You got to sort that out. You got to get your playing consistent where nothing can move you. You got to work on your time.
Yeah.
And so, but what do you think groove is?
What do I
what is
think
it to
groove is?
you? Yeah.
Well, I've thought about it a lot.
Yeah.
And I think it's an energetic thing.
Energy.
I don't want to be like
Okay.
too, but like, you know, because it's not always the same.
Right.
I always find like, you know, when you hear something you've recorded, you're like, man, that was grooving. And you go and retry, you go and try and replay it.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't get it.
Yeah.
Like I'm playing it right and it's probably lining up on the grid, but it doesn't feel the same.
Yeah.
It's a combination of velocity.
Mm-hmm.
If you're playing to a band, the classic thing is like when you hear, say, a band coming back through a set of speakers and go, wow, it's grooving, and you zoom in on the grid, it's like, oh, but
it's not in time.
And it's like,
not,
but this is wrong, or is, you know, it's obviously not wrong, but it's like if you were to look at the grid, you'd be like, oh, but the kick's like a little late, and maybe the bass is a little bit in front.
Yeah.
But that's what makes the magic. And I remember Paul Hudson.
Yeah.
We did a 2-hour masterclass at the con.
Yeah.
Like my second year,
yeah.
and it was on groove. And at the time, I was like, I didn't get it. And I wish I could take that class now, because now I do.
Yeah.
You know, and he was using Phil Rudd as an example of the back bleed.
Yeah.
How it's back, it's huge, it's got a bit of swing. It's not swing, but you know, it's got a swagger and
swagger to it. Yeah.
It makes you go like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I was driving down here, there was 2 songs back to back. Robbie Williams' Feel.
Yeah.
In the middle, my Z. You know, one's
Yeah.
pop, one's electronic programs. And both of them, I went, oh, they make me do that.
Yes.
You know, and some people would say, oh, Zed, he's programmed, but from what I know, he uses real drummers and MIDI maps, the electronic sounds to get that feel. Otherwise, it's stiff. Yeah. So, yeah, I think anything that makes you, you know, I probably look like a fool doing that, but, you know, the swagger,
well, groove makes people move.
Groove makes people move. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like what gets them on the dance floor or what.
So, I was interested to hear what because I've spoken to students quite a lot about, we're playing funk.
Yeah.
And they're playing at the moment, say, something that's classical.
Yeah.
And 2 different styles. They both have their own groove.
Yeah.
But it can be a hard thing to teach, because I guess it's like learning flamenco. You really want to learn flamenco? Go live Spain.
Yeah.
Go live in Spain. You can, you know, you're around the culture, you are immersed in it, and you know, it's well known that if you really, really want to play that, you go live there.
Yes.
Sorry if I spark any arguments on that, but
no, it's true though. You have to immerse yourself in the culture you want to be or live in, or you know, if it's a musical culture, then by all means, you need to do what you can to immerse yourself in that. Yeah, I think for me, my approach to groove, first of all, I try to get my timing as consistent as possible, and then the other thing is then getting the notes as consistent, like the sound as consistent as possible. But yeah, I think it definitely depends on the environment you're in as well. Because I could play you a beat now, and it will just sound like a beat until it has some kind of context, which is supplied by other music. Yeah. So again, like sometimes, you talked about a groove not working and or it doesn't sound right. And so, there's been times like that where it's like, oh, something's not right, or it's and most often I find it's because we're playing too many notes. And so a lot of times it's like, okay, let's try something different on the hats, or let's pull the ghost notes out of the snare and just do the backbeats and just see what happens. And so, and I think for me, I am always analysing what I'm kind of listening to what I'm playing and analysing, the evenness of the hands and then also, what the kick's doing. But, it depends, again, on the context of what you're doing. So in a session, I'm concentrating on that because I know my part. I don't need to really be listening to what the rest of the band are doing because it's already recorded or it's a demo, and so I've just got to do my part and make sure it sounds good. Live, though, I'm always listening to what everyone else is doing. I'm trying to keep my time as best as I can, try and make that consistent, try and make each hit consistent. But yeah, I try to be all ears,
Yep.
you know, on the live gig.
Yep.
Yeah, and you know the visual
Yep.
communication is just important. Like a lot of times, I'll watch a singer because even they don't know that their body or their movements kind of tell me what is coming up. You know what they're thinking, and that's one thing I'm always trying to anticipate is what's coming up next in the song. You know, oftentimes we're doing songs you play quite a lot, so you know what's coming up next. But, you know, as a drummer, if you're coming up to the next part of a song, there's certain things you need to do. You might need to build the intensity or the dynamics will be changing in the next part. They'll either be going louder or softer, or they might stay exactly the same. So there's a lot of little things that you need to kind of be aware of and kind of thinking about when you're performing live.
Can we play a bit?
Sure.
Can we do a funk beat?
A funk beat.
And can we maybe, I'll do my best too, demonstrate playing ahead of the beat.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of see how that can change the groove.
I've never been great at that. Like, I always feel
Me
like...
either.
I always feel like I'm playing ahead of the beat.
Right.
To play behind the beat, that's probably more of a challenge for me. And then who knows if I'm ahead or behind anyway. Like, it's... I think it's a vibe. It's all about the vibe. So if we kind of just do a medium thing, and what I'll do is I'll kind of I'll start out busy, but I'll kind of increasingly simplify as we go along, just to see how that changes whatever we're doing. So do you want me to set it up and you can join in?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm just
I'll
going
follow you.
Kind of go about there. Yeah.
Yep. That's it.
And I'll start off with 16ths, like a 16th groove.
Yep.
And then we'll just see what happens. And then if I'm feeling it, we'll go and we'll add a bit of percussion in too, just for the fun of it. So, all right, here we go.
Did I get it? No.
So close.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what happens.
Oh, there's that little bit of
finger style, and then this happens.
beat displacement. I thought I'd throw that in there just to see how.
Oh, that's cool. That's awesome. But as you
so loud. I'm usually
awesome.
always got like in-ear monitors in, and I just forget how loud drums are.
Yep. Oh. But I mean, I feel the groove on that, and you're talking about taking out ghost notes.
Yeah.
How things open up more.
Yeah, change.
More space. You allow for other instruments to fill the gaps. Because it's tempting to chop out.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah.
It's that's one of the things that I am always challenged with, because you spend hours practicing and you build up all this repertoire of chops, and then to not use it
Yep.
is it shows a discipline,
Yep.
that is really hard
Yep.
for me when
Yeah.
you've got that whole plethora of things that you can do
Yeah.
that you should never do because just because you can do them doesn't
Yep.
mean you should.
Yep.
But, it's taken me a long time
Yeah.
to learn to play
Yep.
what's best for a song
Yep.
and not what I want to
Yep.
throw into a song,
I think it's a sign of a professional and mature musician.
Yeah.
Is when, your job tonight is to play the Back in Black cover.
Yeah.
But I know you can play, the most technical, advanced stuff.
Yeah.
But to sit there and play that well and not have, like, it I know what you mean. It takes, I could really do X, Y, Z here, but, there's someone singing and there's people singing along. So we're going to play Wonderwall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's a funny
Yeah.
it's a funny thing, isn't it, music? Because you grow up idolizing players that are
Yeah.
just technically up here.
Yeah.
And then, but a majority of what you do to earn your money is just sitting here.
Yeah.
Yeah. When do I get to put in that amazing
Yeah.
Dave Weckl
Yeah.
lick? And when do I get to chop out on double kicks
Yeah.
like Virgil did? No,
Yeah.
no, you don't need to do that.
Can we do that again?
Yeah.
And can you chop out?
No.
I would love to hear more.
I've got nothing to chop out on.
Oh.
There's no toms. There's,
Yep,
I
yep.
mean, like I could show you some little things that I add
Yeah.
just to put a little bit of spice
Okay.
into a groove.
Yeah.
So, and then some of these will be at different tempos.
Sorry,
just to show
chop
you.
out on us there.
Yeah, I'm going to chop that out.
Yep.
So, like, for one of the, like, there's some little patterns. Like, as a
Yep.
drummer, you learn patterns. It's
Yep.
all, maths.
Yep.
3 of these and 1 of this,
Yep.
or 3 of these and 2 of this,
Yep.
or
Yep.
So, like, I think a lot in patterns.
Yep.
And so, one of the techniques you learn right at the start
Yep.
is one of them is a single stroke roll, which
Right.
is exactly what it says, single strokes. Single, like right, left, right, left.
Yep.
And again, when you do it properly, it should sound like it's just one
Yep.
stick hitting, like not 2 different sounds. Not like that,
Right.
but so you're aiming for consistency,
Yep.
and then you develop your speed.
Yep.
And obviously, you want to try and get that as consistent as
Yep.
possible. Then you learn to do 2 hits on each stick, which is called a double stroke roll. So then we're going. So 2.
Yep.
And again, then you just build up your consistency and your speed. So you can do
Yep.
it on different parts of the drum kit.
Yep.
So one of the things that I like to do is integrate that into like a double stroke roll into a groove.
Yep.
And so the way I do that is by inverting it. So starting off with a single
Yep.
and then going to a double
Right.
from there. So rather than start with right, right, I'd start with the second right.
Okay.
And so that means the rest of the pattern would be right, left, left, right.
Right.
And then it repeats.
Okay.
So that just opens up the sound a bit more to be. So the downbeat or the pulse is. Instead of that.
Yep.
So doing that inverted double stroke means I can, if I put the right hand on the hats, left hand on the snare, you get this kind of sound. So your left hand is always just doing the same 2 notes, same velocity.
Yep.
I treat them like ghost notes.
Yep.
And then if we added a kick in, speeding it up obviously a little bit. So then you can kind of build a bit of a voice there, a bit of a
Yeah.
language just based around inverted doubles.
Yep.
So a lot of times if I'm doing like a 16th note thing, instead of doing a fill at the end of a phrase, I might just add in that inverted double
Right.
thing there. So, I mean, it's a simple little idea.
Yep.
But I guess that's one thing I've found with the whole drumming thing is if you think about it as patterns, then it's not so hard.
Okay.
Because it's just a little pattern. And if you can do that pattern at this speed on one drum, then you can easily be creative with it and try, what if I put it here and here?
Right.
And what does it sound like here and here?
Yep.
So one of the little patterns that, if I go back to that Virgil Donati video that I first bought as a teenager, one of the patterns that he had in there, he had a section in that video on triplets.
Okay.
And so one of the patterns was just right, left, which is single hand right and then two on left, obviously. So it doesn't sound like much there, a bit faster. So that's what it is.
Yeah.
If we pop the right hand on the hi-hat, so we can kind of make a groove out of that. If we speed it up a bit. Pop both hands on the hats. So that's another little pattern that I always find myself kind of reverting to. But again, as a little spicy bit rather than I would never play a whole song with that groove unless it had to be.
Yep.
But I mean, there's little things like that. Little interactions or patterns between your kick and your snare.
Yep.
I don't know.
I think the simplified kit, I don't want to use the word simplified if it offends anyone, but I mean, the strip back kit, snare kick, hats, cymbal, it really outlines that beautifully because, I mean, when you have access to this, and this, it's like, oh, well, I've got, all you have is kick, snare, and hats. You have to think a bit more.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's
it brings a bit of creativity out. Or it forces you to be creative because you've only got, let's say, the three main components of groove here, like hat, snare, and kick. That is what you need for a groove, you know. And so everything else is colour. In a way. And so if you can't master these, then you're not a drummer. You know, it's like
Mate, this has been awesome.
It's fun.
Mate, I feel privileged to be interviewing you because you've had a very long career, very successful career. You've played with some big names here, yet you're still so humble and so grounded. And one last thing is that a lot of people I've played with have played with a lot of awesome people, and I've been privileged to learn off them. But you're all such cool people. And I really mean that.
Thank
I'm
you.
not blowing smoke because,
as
I said before, word travels fast if you're mate. Thanks so much again
Thank
for coming
you.
in.
Amazing.
Really appreciate it. You want to play one more time?
I don't know. Let's go something a bit faster. It's about there.
get that on.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Sorry. Polyrhythms.
Yes. Oh,
That's
okay. So
amazing.
that,
That's
I mean, we
amazing.
could just keep
it's
going.
so cool.
Right, left, right, left foot. That's like that triplet thing.
Oh,
again.
yeah.
But I'm just doing. That kind of, it's just one little pattern.
Yeah. Mate, thanks so much again. Folks, Darran Muller, where can we find you?
Oh, everywhere. So yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. The Instagram handle is Darran Drummer, spelled with an A, Darran. Kind of once I get the Rage Cage launched, there will be a website. And actually, I do have darranmuller.com. And even though that's a very basic one-page thing for now, that will kind of be upgraded within the next few months. So,
fantastic.
Yeah.
Mate, thanks so much again.
Cool.
It's been
Awesome.
Awesome time. So anytime, love to have you back.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.